Hong Kong is bracing for more disorder on Monday as some pro-democracy protesters call for a general strike. Police have been trying to control small groups of protesters who tried to disrupt the metro system during rush hour. At least one arrest has been made. Over the weekend, there were brutal scenes of police violence following chaotic protests. Passengers filmed police storming a train compartment, beating passengers, and using pepper spray. Well, for the very latest, let's cross over to Hong Kong, where DW's Charlotte Chelson-Pill is standing by. Charlotte, schools and universities are returning to session in Hong Kong today. What's the situation like there?
This was meant to be the first day back for so many students across Hong Kong today, but rather than just a normal first day, this will certainly be one that they'll remember for a very long time. I'm at an assembly here at the moment where a number of students who are taking part in that strike are gathered. I'm sure you can see a number of them behind me dressed in their school uniforms still, many of them with their faces covered, feared, afraid of being identified. There are so many repercussions for people taking part in protests here that people just don't want their faces shown. Now, alongside this rally, there is also a rally happening at a university students on strike, as well as the general strike, employees not going to work either, as you mentioned. People tried to disrupt the travel service again this morning, tried to stop trains. There was a very heavy police presence on the platforms to try and prevent that and allow today to run as smoothly as possible. But clearly the idea today is to cause as much disruption as possible.
Well, presumably, Charlotte, some of those students will want to get on with their studies. With many of them back at school, could the protest movement lose some of its momentum now?
Well, yes, to be clear, it's not all students who are participating in this strike. As for whether or not it will lose momentum now the schools are back, well, there's a couple of factors there. First of all, it's not clear whether or not that this is going to be a one-off event. This strike does continue tomorrow as well. There has been some discussion as well about whether or not they should make it a weekly thing. Every Monday, these students are not returning to schools. But one big discussion point here at the moment is what would happen among those students who are back at school, who have been taking part in these protests week after week. As we know, very young people have been on the streets, some of them on the front line, some indeed of school age have been arrested. There's this concern about what happens when you mix these students who are pro-democracy supporters and those who haven't been taken to the streets. Will there be bullying? What happens to the children of police officers who are the target of so much anger here amongst this pro-democracy movement? But to be clear, so much of this violence takes place on the weekends, so these students will still be able to take to the streets this weekend once again, should they choose to.
Well, we saw scenes of police brutality over this past weekend. How are people in Hong Kong reacting to that?
There is an awful lot of anger among pro-democracy supporters about what unfolded on Saturday. We saw those really dramatic images of police entering train carriage using batons against passengers. It wasn't clear even whether or not they'd been taking part in the protest that day or whether or not they were just caught up in the violence. Now, rather than have that put people off, the fear of being hurt and, of course, the very real fear of being arrested, instead it seems to be fueling this movement even more. People so angry, emboldened even, to take to the streets to fight for what they say is the encroachment of Beijing on their rights here in Hong Kong, and anger against the police at what they say is their mishandling of this entire 13-week protest movement.
Charlotte, thanks for bringing us up to date. DW's Charlotte Chelson-Pill there in Hong Kong.